Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast, a show created to be your go-to source for straightforward retirement advice. Best of all, it is presented in a language that you can understand. Here's your host, Certified Financial Planner, Greg Gonzalez.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm Greg Gonzalez. Thanks for joining me today. This is episode number 214. Today's episode is going to cover a variety of topics. So first off, the latest Social Security Trustee Report. What's the latest update with Social Security? We're going to break that down in the first segment of the show. We'll talk about the simple facts, what you need to know, and what people are doing about it. And the next segment of the show, or second half of the show, we're going to talk about some listener questions. But first off, we'll talk about our spend down strategy in retirement. We have a lot of people that are approaching retirement and say, gosh, I don't know what I should assume as far as my expenses in retirement. It's kind of hard because there's going to be changes. Health insurance is one of them. Every day's a Saturday. I'm likely going to spend more, but maybe not. So we'll talk about the transition to the decumulation phase from the accumulation phase prior to retirement. A lot of people do have a difficult time adjusting to this new psychology of spending after retirement. We'll talk about how the best plan for this. So that'll be a good conversation. I remember a meeting this past week that a client's going to be retiring in 2027, and they said a line that I just had to write down. They said, it's going to take an intentional adjustment on our part. And I told him that line was so good that I'm going to repeat it and steal it from him and use it. It's an intentional adjustment of spending in retirement. And we'll dive deeper in that discussion on this episode to explain exactly what he meant and what I take from it. And then we'll end the show with some listener questions, as many as we have time for. Those are always really, really fun. And a lot of people submit their questions to our website, retirestrongfa.com. If you haven't been there, you're a new listener, and we do have a lot of new listeners. Check out the resources tab. You can download free resources like our tax guide, Women's Guide to Retirement, Social Security Guide, Retirement Secret Sauce is on there. I'm working on a retirement playbook that I'm going to make available later on this year. And there's even a PDF fillable budgeting tool that will really, really help you out as well. It's all free on our website, link in the show notes. And then if you're one of those people that's getting serious about retirement and says, hey, I don't have a plan, I don't have a strategy, and how am I ever going to feel good and confident about retirement without a written strategy or written plan that's going to get from where I am today to where I want to be, which is retired. That's exactly what we do and we help people with at Retire Strong. So on our website, the top right corner, there's a button that says Get Started. You can fill out the form and we'll get in touch with you that way to see if we'd be a good fit working together, because we may or may not be. But I'm excited about this episode. Again, we're going to kick off with an update on Social Security. So first quarter of this year, Social Security Trustees Report came out with the new figures. Surprise, surprise, it's not good news for Social Security. If nothing is done, no changes are made between now and 2032, and that's the end of 2032, benefits would have to be cut by 22%. So we're talking about 78 cents on the dollar. And why is that? There's a lot of factors that play into this, but you got over 73 million Americans that are collecting Social Security. You got about 184 million Americans that are paying into Social Security. And by 2035, which is 9 years from now, you're going to have almost 80 million Americans collecting Social Security. So we have an aging population that is receiving Social Security income or will soon be receiving Social Security income. And you've got other people that are saying, well, if this cut happens, that's only $500 a month. A reduction of a benefit for the average person collecting Social Security. That represents basically a 22% cut. For some, it will be more than others. And there was an AARP study that was done in June of last year, 2025, looking at people collecting Social Security that were retired. 66% of them said they rely substantially on Social Security income. That's 2/3. Whereas 20 years ago, the same study, only half, roughly 52% of people said that they relied substantially on Social Security. So what does that mean? Well, that means the costs are up in this country and we don't have the retirement savings that we once have. We certainly 20 years ago, people had maybe more pension income on average than the typical American retiree now. But the numbers are not looking good for Social Security. And the Social Security Commissioner basically said, hey, it's up to Congress to make the changes, to vote, make the changes to fix Social Security so the system doesn't go insolvent by 2032. So Congress is going to have to act. It's 2026, 2032. I know it used to sound like a long, long way away, but that's just 6 short years. In my eyes, one of the problems is that if you're in Congress, they can't agree on anything, number one. And number two, if you want to get reelected, proposing difficult changes to Social Security is not a good way. It's not a good way to make friends, and it can even upset some people. So nobody probably wants to rock the boat. But there's never an easy time to make a difficult decision, and something's got to be done. So what we're seeing people do is there's some people that are saying, okay, people approaching retirement, as a worst case, let's say Social Security doesn't get fixed and benefits are announced that they're going to be slashed down 22%. What we're having some people do is adjust their retirement plans, their retirement income plans, saying that, hey, we expect 75 cents on the dollar, or if you want to be exact, 78 cents on the dollar, with this expectation of a 22% cut by the end of 2032. Now, in my opinion, Congress is going to keep dragging their feet and dragging their feet and dragging their feet. I've been talking about this the last 6 years I've been doing the podcast. We've all known that there's a Social Security deficit. The system, we've known about this shortfall that's coming for years and years and years, and Congress has failed to act. And all of the proposals that have come forward have gotten shot down or put on the back burner. But the fact of the matter is, in 9 short years, you're going to have about 80 million people in this country collecting a Social Security check. Good luck telling them that you're going to cut their benefits by over 20%. That would have drastic implications in this country. And some of the fixes that they have proposed for Social Security, they would increase inflation pretty significantly, in my opinion. So there might even be unintended consequences of these fixes. I think these reports that Social Security is going to be a shortfall by the end of 2032 are going to cause more and more people, at least to some degree, to claim their benefit earlier than they had originally planned on. Now, that may or may not be the best decision for them, but keep in mind they can always go back and suspend their benefits once they reach full retirement age. And one last thing, somebody had asked what the earnings limit was for Social Security. So you pay into Social Security on the first $184,500 that you earn. And for a married couple, that's per person. And that is the 2026 figure. If you look back 2 years ago in 2024, the earnings limit, so meaning you pay into Social Security, you and your employer pay into Social Security. 2 years ago, that earnings limit or earnings cap was $168,600. So for everything you make over and above that limit, you no longer pay into Social Security. But look, it's almost gone up 20 grand in 2 years. And some people say, okay, well, in 2026, you pay into Social Security for the first $184,500 that you earn. Maybe we should eliminate that earnings cap. Only 6% of the people, approximately 6% of the people that pay into Social Security are above that limit. If you're in that camp, you as a listener, and you're making above $184,500, as far as Social Security people paying into the system, you're in that top 6%. So hopefully we'll have some more positive updates for Social Security in the future. But in my opinion, Congress is going to drag this decision out on how to fix Social Security for as long as they possibly can. So we might be waiting a little while. So let's switch gears here and talk about this next topic. We've had a lot of listeners submit questions on the best way for a decumulation strategy or a spend down strategy. Now, there's more that goes into this decision making than probably meets the eye. So some people want to know, okay, specifically, if this is my account and I have 10 different positions, which position do I sell as I begin to take withdrawals in retirement from my account? And at that level, that's a very granular level. That's something you got to decide with your retirement planner, with your financial planner, because those liquidations, when you sell a position, maybe it's a number of shares of a fund or a security, there's not only tax implications of that, but it can also throw your investment allocation out of whack based on the decisions that you make there. And it's just like if you were baking a dish and you added 3 times the amount of salt, it's probably not going to taste too good. We've had a dish before dinner that was just too salty. I had a steak not so long ago where the seasoning, it was just way over seasoned. The seasoning was just, it was terrible. And I was thinking to myself, I can't believe I paid for that. I could have cooked a steak so much better at home. But getting back to the withdrawal strategy, like here at Retire Strong, what we use is a bucket strategy that makes sense. It's, got an income bucket. It's got a cash reserve or emergency fund bucket, and then it has a long-term growth bucket. And we do have a spend down strategy that we teach our clients, and it's academically based, and there's a lot of research and science that's gone into it. But at a very high level, it's going to be a different spend down strategy when times are good, when a portfolio is in incline versus a decline, like in a recession or something like that. The spending will naturally pivot should we get into a decline in the portfolio or the market or whatever conditions may exist in that time when, okay, we're on the decline. Versus, like it's been the last few years, it's been on a steep incline. So the spending strategy is different in that environment. But the important point here is you need to come up with some kind of spend down strategy that you believe in, that's going to give you confidence. And it really doesn't matter what we're doing at Retire Strong or what your brother-in-law is doing. But it's important to note that this whole idea of decumulation, it really can make people uneasy and uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. And when you're going from a accumulation, so you're saving your 401k or you're saving for retirement in some specific retirement account or accounts, to now transitioning into spend mode. So, okay, now I'm spending my resources. It's kind of like driving on a full tank of gas. And when you see that gauge start to go down and now you're only 3/4 full, it makes you kind of uneasy, especially maybe that first year of retirement. Should you go into a decline in market conditions and now you see your 401k going down plus your spending, that tends to make people uneasy. So there's not only a psychological adjustment that needs to take place, and it's easier for some people than others, but what one person this past week that was approaching retirement, he's going to retire the first part of next year in 2027, we were kind of going through spending. Okay, where is his income going to come from in retirement? What is that decumulation strategy going to look like? Because he's got a variety of different accounts that he could choose to spend from. And we dialed in that strategy, and the purpose was to kind of show him, okay, this is where your money is going to be coming from in retirement, and this is how much is going to be direct deposited into your checking account on a biweekly basis. And his comment was, well, this is going to take an intentional adjustment on our part, because the way we operate right now is our budget's a little loose. So meaning, if we want to go buy a brand new TV, it really doesn't go into the budget. We'll spend $1,000 on new TV and not even think about it because we've got a lot of discretionary income. He said, come next year in retirement, we're going to be able to do okay. We're going to have a nice lifestyle, but we're not going to have that big discretionary income with bonuses and things like that we're kind of used to. Because here's the thing about it, it has to be intentional spending and a disciplined approach, with the idea that we're trying to allow our money to still grow so it has the highest likelihood of lasting for 30 years or longer, or however long we need it. Because one of the biggest fears that we hear is running out of money in retirement. It's one of the biggest fears Americans have. And we hear it over and over again. I don't want to go back to work. If I retire, I'm done, and that's it. Now, if I need to work a little part-time, maybe for $1,000 a month or something to help with health insurance, just to kind of stay busy, I'll do it. But I'm not going back to the grind like I was used to. And so that is a suggestion that I always give to a lot of people, if it's in the cards for them, if it's possible, is what I call a semi-retirement, or going down to a couple days a week, or maybe it's, doing some consulting work, whatever that might look like for you. Because when you're going from 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, however many hours you work, to zero, to nothing, that's a drastic change. And also, those first years of retirement, again, a lot of changes. And if you can go to, okay, let's say 2 or 3 days a week to then eventually go down and be fully retired, there's a lot of benefits there, not only psychologically, but also from an income point of view. And it allows you to adjust into retirement to kind of see what this new life is all about. And there's a couple things that I want to bring up here, because people do struggle with starting to spend their accumulated savings, the resources that they have. That's what we find. Some people really, really have a hard time with that. But getting back to the point of, okay, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is not dying with the most amount of money. That's not really a legacy, for most people anyway. The ultimate measure of retirement success isn't the size of what's left over at the end of life, as far as like the dollar amount in your 401k or your retirement savings. It's whether your money helped create freedom and purpose, generosity and connection and independence, financial independence in retirement. Sometimes, and I've said this over and over again, the clients that work with us here at Retire Strong, they're looking for the permission, giving them the permission to be able to enjoy their wealth that they have spent so long, decades, saving and investing and sacrificing to build. And I've had countless people over the years that have retired, and we're talking about their spending strategy, and then they come back to me or our team at Retire Strong and say, "Are you sure we're going to be okay? You sure this is okay to take this withdrawal?" Because they're not used to it. They're used to saving. It's become a habit of saving, watching the money build and grow. Maybe there was the company match and maybe bonuses and profit sharing, all these different things. They were in the accumulation phase, and getting out of that accumulation mindset and getting into the decumulation mindset, huge adjustment for some people. And then we see some people get into the one more year trap. So what I mean by that is they say, okay, I'll just work one more year. And then 1 year becomes 2, and 2 becomes 3. Oh, and then I just got a raise and I might get this bonus in another 6 months. So I'll hang on for that. And then what it really boils down to is how much is enough. I had a client the other day that, they were talking about claiming Social Security at 65. And then they said, oh gosh, if we waited 1 more year and we retired next year and paid into Social Security for 1 more year, we would have an additional $150 a month. And I said, yeah, and if you did that, but if you worked until 70, you worked 5 more years and paid into Social Security another 5 more years, you'd have over $1,000 more in monthly income. And they got my point, because that's 5 more years of not being able to enjoy retirement. So how much is enough? What's really the cost? Retiring at 65 versus 70, I don't know a lot. But what I do know is you're going to be a lot younger at 65 than you are 70. You're going to feel better. And I think those first 5 years from 65 to 70 would be a lot more enjoyable than a first 5 years of retirement starting at 70 to 75. You're younger, you feel better. Traveling is going to be much more enjoyable. Who knows what your health would be like at between 70 and 75. And we've heard it said over and over again, your time is your wealth. And the biggest regret I hear from people that maybe waited to retire, maybe they didn't love their career. And I ask them, do you have any regrets? And they always say, oh gosh, I wish we would have retired earlier. Now that I'm older, I don't really feel like traveling. I don't really feel like doing much. Now I'm having shoulder surgeries or having my knee replaced. But I guess we got more money and we'll be able to leave the kids more money one day. Again, I mention these stories just to kind of get you thinking. Certainly, if you love your career, if it brings you joy and is the highlight of waking up every morning, well, then maybe you do want to continue to work until 70 or 75. What's right for you is not right for somebody else. But I do want to bring up the fact of, hey, you're going to be the most active in those first 10 years. That has been our experience at Retire Strong with people retiring. And it's one of our core beliefs at Retire Strong. The go-go years, those first 10 years of retirement, in our experience, we see people spend more, they travel more, they do more. And we find that people, they tend to spend their money on experiences and purpose and hobbies and relationships. And those that are willing to spend, and again, as uncomfortable as it can be in the psychology of the decumulation phase, those that do and get over that, and where it almost becomes a habit of, okay, this is my new lifestyle, those that are willing to spend their money on the experiences, the hobbies, the purpose, relationships, and health, they're happier people. They have evidence and studies have shown they get more enjoyment and fulfillment out of retirement because they're willing to spend and enjoy the fruits of their labor. And those people that say, oh, we'll continue to save and sacrifice in retirement so that one day there'll be a pool of money left over for the kids or family and loved ones or charity, those people do not report the same level of happiness and fulfillment in retirement. And there's a lot of studies out there that show this, that report this as evidence. And I'm going to leave you with one last question to think about and consider before we get into some more listener questions here and end the show. If you knew with certainty that your money would last the rest of your life, how would you spend differently starting tomorrow in retirement? And I'll ask it again real quickly. If you knew with certainty that your money would last the rest of your life, how would you spend your money differently starting tomorrow in retirement? It's kind of like, hey, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do today, starting today? Start thinking about that. And what it will uncover is the true enjoyment that you want to have, what the deep meaning that you want to get out of retirement. And that might even start to shape your retirement vision and what you want to do and how you want to enjoy those years. So the first question that I want to address, listener question, this has come up multiple times, is the withdrawal strategy. So the spending strategy. So a lot of questions people have. Some people say, okay, how often should I take the withdrawals? Should I take a withdrawal weekly or every 2 weeks, like I'm used to maybe getting paid while I'm working? Should I take a withdrawal once a month? Should I take a withdrawal once a quarter? I can tell you typically what we see with our retired clients is they either do monthly or they do every 2 weeks, biweekly. Now, keep in mind, Social Security checks are sent out just once a month, depending on your date of birth. They are, direct deposited for most people into their bank account. Pensions are also once a month, and they tell you this day of the month, we will direct deposit your pension check into your bank account. You might have multiple different deposits or paychecks, if you will, in the form of income like Social Security income, pension income, and maybe withdrawals from different retirement accounts. You might be taking a little bit out of an IRA, a little bit out of a brokerage or non-retirement account, and maybe you're taking a little bit out of a Roth, whatever that looks like for you. Now, some people have questions on how much to take, and there's a lot of studies out there as far as, okay, a percentage of our overall portfolio. So a lot of people have heard about the 4% rule. So meaning we're going to take a 4% distribution out of our nest egg. And what that means is if we got $1 million saved for retirement, a 4% withdrawal would be $40,000 per year. And again, that's gross. So think about, okay, $40,000 per year, we have to factor in taxes. So what are you left over after taxes each and every month? That's what I would encourage you to really, really nail down and look at. Now, I'm not telling you, hey, for everybody listening, just go off of this 4% rule. I think that's a rule of thumb. It's not what we subscribe to in each and every situation at Retire Strong. Rules of thumb are okay for a general audience. I think there are some years where taking more than 4% or less might be prudent, depending on somebody's situation, depending on if they're doing Roth conversions. It is simply a rule of thumb, and maybe you want a more flexible plan. We like to have flexible spending plans for our clients because we know, hey, things are going to come up. And when they do, we need to be prepared. So what that means is, okay, if we go into a recession, if your spending in one particular year or another was greater than the average spending, maybe you want to buy a new vehicle, go on more trips, be outrageously generous one year. Whatever the case may be, the planning needs to be flexible. So we've kind of answered, okay, how often do you take the withdrawals? What percentage or dollar amount do you take the withdrawals? We talked about the 4% rule as a rule of thumb to kind of use as a general guideline. And then your plan will dictate your specific plan. Like if you operate on the go-go years, the slow-go years, the no-go years, your plan may operate differently, much differently than like a 4% rule. And then the other question is, which account? If I've got a variety of different accounts, I've got Roth dollars, I've got pre-tax 401k dollars, and maybe the bulk of my money is in that pre-tax account. Maybe I've got a brokerage account or multiple brokerage accounts. Maybe you've got annuities. Maybe you've got whole life, cash value life insurance. Maybe you have company stock. In what order? How do you spend and cherry pick your withdrawals from these different types of accounts to produce the lowest tax bill each and every year in retirement? That's one of the major goals that you can do because it's going to leave more money in your pocket, less money in Uncle Sam's pocket, which is a win-win. And your money is going to last longer. And it's one of the most enjoyable things that I do as a financial planner and that our team at Retire Strong does. We get more enjoyment out of that, coming up with a sequential withdrawal strategy year in and year out in an effort to keep your tax bill lower. We call that winning by not paying excess taxes. And then the last portion of this, we talked about, okay, how often you take these withdrawals, how much is a dollar amount, which accounts that you withdraw from, and then when you take these withdrawals, which positions, which securities are you selling? Are you selling mutual funds within the account? What investments do you liquidate and which ones do you keep? Or do you just sell like what we call proportional? So if you own 10 funds at 10% each and you need a $1,000 withdrawal, you're selling $100 of each position. That is called pro rata, or just in the percentage that you own the security. Or do you say, okay, I'm going to cherry pick this position because of a certain reason? And you and your financial planner, this is getting really, really into the weeds. That's a discussion that you and your financial planner have to determine what's going to be best for you. Because that goes into your investment planning strategy, which is going to be, different for different people because of, okay, the income that you need and your appetite for risk, among other factors. And I did have a listener question saying, why do we not specifically spend a lot of time going through specific investment options or maybe mutual funds or specific securities that I would recommend for the general public? So I'll be really quick to answer that. It's because I am licensed. I have licenses, and I cannot just give a blanket advice, like a one-size-fits-all advice, because it wouldn't be appropriate. So if I said, okay, XYZ mutual fund is a great mutual fund and everybody should own it, that's terrible advice because I don't know everybody's specific situation. And really, to make prudent recommendations when it comes to investment planning and in a portfolio, I need to know somebody's complete picture before I can give that advice. So if you hear all these yahoos out there that are giving investment or advice on securities or stocks or mutual funds, they're not licensed. So it's like your intoxicated family member at Thanksgiving dinner that's, giving investment advice. It's the same thing. They're not licensed, so they can just give you their opinion on anything. It's like somebody giving you medical advice that's not a doctor. My doctor needs me to come into the office before they're going to write me a prescription for an antibiotic or anything. They need to meet me and see what's going on and ask questions before they're going to write a prescription. So, unfortunately, that's how it works. So we do not discuss any specific securities or mutual funds because they would only be appropriate or suitable for a segment of the population, not everybody, because we all have different circumstances and risk tolerances and goals and objectives. and even preferences. Some people don't want to invest in certain companies like oil companies or whatever. So hopefully that was a long-winded answer of why we don't get into specifics on this podcast. The next question is about beneficiary IRAs and what do you do when you inherit an IRA from mom or dad? They were getting conflicting information as far as what are called required minimum distributions. When you inherit money from mom or dad and it's pre-tax inside of an IRA, you do have to take mandatory annual withdrawals. The next question you need to ask is, did you inherit the IRA before or after January 1st of 2020? And it's really when mom or dad passed away. So let's say you inherited the IRA, mom passed away in 2019. You're on the old rules. You're grandfathered into the old rules, which means that if you inherited a $100,000 IRA from mom, you can take out lifetime, what's called a stretch IRA. So you can take out every year, you can take out a required minimum distribution based on your age and the account value. Your financial planner, or there's online calculators that will help you calculate this. Even the custodian of the IRA will help you calculate this. But it just means there's annual distributions that need to come from the account over your lifetime. You're taxed on these. So when you take the withdrawal, you can choose to withhold taxes, federal and state taxes. Now, what happens if you inherit mom or dad's IRA after January 1st of 2020? Then you're on the 10-year rule. And recently, the IRS came back because there was a lot of confusion. A lot of CPAs didn't really understand when the 10-year rule went into effect. In other words, can you wait until the 10th year to take all the withdrawals out? Well, the IRS came and trued up this law that says, okay, you've got 10 years to take these withdrawals, and by the end of the 10th year, that IRA has to be liquidated and taxes paid. But there are annual mandatory required minimum distributions throughout those 10 years. Now, you can take all the money up front and just pay the taxes and be done with it, or you can take it out in chunks every single year. But by the end of the 10th year, the account has to be liquidated and taxes paid. But at a minimum, you want to take those annual withdrawals over 10 years. Your financial planner will help you calculate those. Just ask. But keep in mind, this will impact your tax situation too. Because if you're still working, now you've got taxable income coming from that beneficiary IRA, which is taxed as ordinary income. So what some people will do is, if they're still working and they inherit an IRA from mom or dad, and they have, let's say their required minimum distribution is $5,000 for the year. Let's say they're not maxing out their pre-tax 401k. They would bump that up by $5,000, which again would give them a tax deduction on the money going in their company 401k, knowing that that's going to be offset by the $5,000 that's coming out of the beneficiary IRA. So they're taxed on the IRA, they're getting the tax deduction on the money going in the pre-tax 401k, so it's a wash. Now keep in mind your paycheck would go down because now you're putting an additional $5,000 a year in that pre-tax 401k. So there's little tricks like that you can do to offset the taxes on those required minimum distributions on IRAs that you inherit from mom or dad. Now, one question that we get often is, okay, if I inherit an IRA from mom or dad, can I just convert that to my Roth IRA? And then I'll have more money, pay the taxes on the beneficiary IRA, and more money ends up in my own Roth IRA. Unfortunately, they don't allow us to do that. It's a good thought. Believe me, I wish they did. But sometimes when we ask a question, it sparks another question, and then another question develops after that. So these are all really, really good questions. So keep them coming. Again, submit them to retirestrongfa.com. There's a link to our website in the show notes. Last question of the day here. This question was from a listener that we had a conversation with, and it was sort of apparent that they were kind of on the fence on retiring at the end of this year or working another year in 2027. And the thought came up of, okay, what is the benefit to me of working just one more year? Break it down like I'm a sixth grader. How specifically does working one more year benefit me? So for this particular person, it would mean one more year of health insurance. And the amount that their employer paid, as far as the percentage of the premium, was quite impressive. So the health insurance was only costing them a little over $200 a month, which is very, very affordable for a 63-year-old. And their spouse was also on this group health insurance benefit, so it was covering the spouse as well. Now, the spouse coverage wasn't as inexpensive as the worker, but certainly it was a very, very good value. So we put a dollar amount on that, comparing, okay, if you did retire versus continue to work for one more year, this is the savings for health insurance coverage for that one more year. By continuing to work, there is a benefit there, a clear benefit, and it's health insurance that you're used to. Now, also, we look ahead at the 401k. So a 5% match on $100,000 is $5,000 of a match, and they were fully vested. So that money would go with them once they retire. But also you've got the money that you're contributing. And so if we're contributing 12%, now we've got an additional $12,000 of contributions going to that 401k that we wouldn't have had if we would have retired. So between the 12 that we're contributing, the $5,000 is the company match, that is $17,000 of additional contributions in the 401k. And then, of course, we've got the income. So the income that you're paid for that next 12 months, and why that's impactful is that allows us to delay withdrawals from the 401k and other retirement savings accounts for another 12 months. So that enhances the growth potential of those accounts. And they would be worth more in 12 months by not withdrawing money and letting them continue to grow. And then you might think, okay, well, there's more things to consider here too, like, okay, we can delay our Social Security for another year. So that's going to be X% higher for the rest of our lives. Maybe there's a bonus that you received in addition to the salary that if you would have retired, you wouldn't have received. Okay, then we would add that in there. And how much of a difference does that make? And then looking at maybe advantages. For these people, their house was already paid off. So you could not make the argument of, okay, by working one more year, that'll allow us to use that salary to use discretionary income to get debts paid off, like our mortgage paid off. And then look at, okay, what about other savings? Maybe we're saving in something besides our 401k, that $12,000 that they were saving in that. Or where is that discretionary income going? Does it allow us to save another $8,600 inside of a Roth IRA? That if you would have retired at the end of this year and not worked in 2027, then you wouldn't have the ability to contribute to that Roth IRA because you wouldn't have the earned income. So looking at, okay, all the pros and cons of retiring at the end of this year, 2026, versus working one more year, and you draw a line down the middle of the page, okay, and say, what are the cons? Well, we're going to be 1 year older. And we got young grandkids that we'd like to spend a lot of time with, or as much as we possibly can. So we're going to miss out on some of that. You know, the other disadvantage to working one more year is I don't love my job and maybe I would just be miserable for one more year. Although I had a client recently say, hey, I can do anything for 12 months, no matter what it is. I can just grin and get through it. But you know what? Retiring after another 6 months sounds a lot more better than retiring in 18 months. And so kind of, okay, what's the quality of life going to be like if you retire versus if you work one more year? If you love your job, you might have a different answer. We're also going to be 1 year older if we work one more year. So that's a disadvantage. So we add up the pros and the cons. And what we're able to do, like what we did at Retire Strong, is we run what we call a what if. What if we retire the end of 26 versus the end of 2027? Compare the two. Does it really move the needle working an additional 12 months for those factors that we talked about, the advantages. Okay, we're going into retirement maybe with a bigger nest egg than we would otherwise. Our Social Security is a little bit higher, better health insurance and less expensive health insurance for one more year, getting us closer to Medicare. So you weigh the pros and cons. And then I would say, okay, there's a middle ground. Well, maybe what if we just worked part-time in 2027? So that would be like a what if scenario number 3. And how would that look? And then you can, I guess, seeing is believing. Once you see the plans, you're able to make a more informed decision. And like I said, a lot of times working a couple more months or maybe another 12 months, it really doesn't move the needle enough at the end of the day to justify working another year or 2 or 3 years. But it all depends on your situation. Sometimes it can be very, very meaningful. So I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. If you have questions, visit our website, retirestrongfa.com. I'll see you next time. And remember, always dream big.
Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. The content in this material does not necessarily reflect the views of LPL Financial. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific situation. Your results will vary. The hypothetical rates of return used do not reflect the deduction of fees and charges inherent to investing. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments might be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial planner prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance your overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect completely against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Fixed and variable annuities are suitable for long-term investing, such as retirement investing. Gains from tax-deferred investments are taxed as ordinary income upon withdrawal. Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals made prior to age 59.5 are subject to a 10% IRS penalty tax, and surrender charges may apply. Variable annuities are subject to market risk and may lose value. Riders are additional guarantee options that are available to an annuity or life insurance contract holder. While some riders are part of an existing contract, many others may carry additional fees, charges, and restrictions, and the policyholder should review their contract before purchasing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the United States Social Security Administration or any government agency. Retire Strong Financial Advisors and LPL Financial are not endorsed by or affiliated with the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services or any government agency.
Thank you for listening to the show today. Check us out at our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. And if you want some help from Greg, submit your questions at the bottom of the page or sign up for a 30-minute retirement coaching session with Greg. We'll see you next week.